A racist, a bigot, and a misogynist. Those are just some of the explosive claims made against President Trump by his longtime associate and former White House advisor, Omarosa Manigault Newman, in her new book, Unhinged. Her relationship with the president.
Five children. 20 miles from Selma, several shots were fired. The driverless car veered off the highway and came to a stop at a cattle fence. Mrs. Liuzzo was dead. Arrested and charged with murder were 3 alleged members of the Ku Klux Klan. One was tried, and the jury was unable to reach a verdict. This is an earthen dam, the temporary grave of 3 civil rights workers, 2 white, 1 Negro, Mickey Schwerner, Andrew Goodman, and James Chaney, beaten and shot to death. Among those indicted for this triple slaying were 6 men identified as members of the Ku Klux Klan. None has been brought to trial. In this automobile, Reserve Lieutenant Colonel Lemuel Penn was killed by a shotgun blast while riding through Colbert, Georgia. Arrested for this crime were 4 Knights of the Ku Klux Klan. 2 Klansmen were tried and acquitted. In a few short months, 5 murders, 13 alleged members of the Ku Klux Klan said to be involved in the killings.
When such an order is this moves in and takes over the police power, you are completely at their mercy. And their atrocities and their violence can be visited on anybody that disagrees with them in any given situation.
What started as a joke 100 years ago, when a group of men donned bedsheets for a romp, has over the years attracted to it persons charged with acts of harassment, intimidation, and violence throughout the South. Even though the nation has been outraged for many years, the Ku Klux Klan persists with its bizarre ritual and trappings. But 100 years is a long time for a joke.
CBS Reports presents the Ku Klux Klan, the Invisible Empire. Here is CBS News correspondent Charles Kuralt.
He said, I think Donald Trump is an artful liar. I think he is a greedy, vicious, and arrogant man.
Well, I don't know, is that supposed to be a compliment or not? I'm not sure.
He waged a years-long battle with New York City Mayor Ed Koch.
I hope that New York City has a different mayor at some point, because I think Ed Koch is a total disaster. He's been a very bad mayor for the city.
He helped launch a competitor. to the NFL called the U.S. Football League, and then launched a lawsuit against the NFL when the USFL failed.
The jury in the case delivered its verdict. It ruled the NFL did indeed monopolize pro football, but it awarded damages of just $1.
And in one of his biggest fights of the 1980s, he went up against media mogul Merv Griffin in a fight over a casino in Atlantic City.
People realize now that Merv made a bad deal. It's unfortunate that he's taken a fall, but he has taken the fall. Nothing much I can do about it.
Donald Love.
All through the 1980s, Trump was busy building something new, and it wasn't a skyscraper.
Billionaire developer Donald Trump has put his name on a New York City hotel, shopping center, and apartment buildings, as well as a casino in Atlantic City. And now he's going to put his...
Donald loves that perception. I won. He is still, a year later standing in New York going, I won. He wants to make sure everybody in America knows he won.
But the Donald Trump we know today is more than just a boastful brawler. That's because there's one more tactic that Trump apparently learned in the 80s and uses to great effect on the campaign trail today. Keep people guessing about any long-term plans.
Mr. Trump, what's left in your life? You're 33 years old, you're worth all this money. You say you didn't say that you want to be worth $1 billion.
No, I really don't. I just want to keep busy and keep active.
Could $1 billion buy the White House? What do you think?
Well,
Does
I don't
money
think it
give you...
can. I know a lot of the politicians. I like a lot of the politicians. They're friends of mine.
Trump carefully cultivated speculation about his future. In 1987, he ran...
This is not a wealthy country. People think America, you know, wealth, this and that. The Japanese are saying that. What a wealthy country. I mean, they're saying it and they're laughing. The country's losing $200 billion a year. We ought to go in, the next time they fire so much as a bullet at one of our ships, we ought to go in and take over their oil.
Before he was a presidential candidate,
And I've been saying for years, keep the oil, don't let them have the oil.
before he was a reality TV star,
You're fired.
Donald Trump was a New York tabloid fixture.
The Ku Klux Klan as a secret organization has been allowed to exist in this country. Virtually every president of the United States in the past century has said the Klan has little regard for constituted authority. President Johnson, following the murder of Mrs. Liuzzo in Alabama, defined the Ku Klux Klan as a hooded society of bigots and warned Klansmen to get out of the Klan and return to a decent before it is too late. It is Sunday, the morning after a Ku Klux Klan meeting in Durham, North Carolina. These men are members of the United Klans of America, Knights of the Ku Klux Klan, one of the most exclusive organizations in America. It excludes many Protestants, all Roman Catholics, Jews, Negroes, Spanish Americans, Puerto Ricans, and anyone else who, according to the Ku Klux Klan, is not 100% pure American.
In 1987, he ran a full-page ad in major newspapers that read like a political manifesto.
A blow-up of the ad is now on display at Trump Tower on Fifth Avenue.
The ad was irresistible to the New York press, and the move kept Trump's name in the news.
Trump has said quite seriously that he's a good enough bargainer to negotiate a nuclear disarmament treaty with the Russians.
This is not a wealthy country.
With each of these instances, Trump refined his playbook. His attacks,
Steve, you're going to have to start pushing these people now a little bit, because it's getting a little ridiculous as far as I'm concerned.
his boasts,
We'll probably sell an extra 10,000 season tickets, and that's a lot of tickets.
and his shifting positions.
Do you have the genes to be a successful politician?
Well, you never really know. I think I'm pretty outspoken, and that's not probably a good thing in terms of a politician, but it's a good thing if you ever got elected, you could really do a job.
Now, even back in the 80s, many found Trump's over-the-top personality distasteful.
What may be most discouraging of all is that Palm Beach will accept almost anything if it's got enough money, but somehow it will not accept Donald Trump.
But by playing the role of an unpredictable bully with the Midas touch, Trump showed he couldn't easily be ignored.
I believe that perhaps I'm portrayed differently than I actually am. I believe I'm portrayed in a rougher sense than the actual product. And I hope that's true, because I hope the actual product is a lot more mellow than the portrayal.
And that may be his biggest asset of all. When people attack Trump, they reinforce the version of Trump that Trump wants people to see. And inevitably, that keeps Trump's name in the news.
That doesn't matter because I'm not running for office.
Director John Brennan tweeted to the president, "It's astounding how often you fail to live up to minimum standards of decency, civility, and probity. Seems like you will never understand what it means to be president, nor what it takes to be a good, decent, and honest person. So disheartening, so dangerous for our nation." Joining us now, former CIA Director John Brennan. He is our senior national security and intelligence analyst for MSNBC and NBC News. Director Brennan, the last part of your tweet really captured my attention, saying that it's so dangerous for our nation. In what ways?
Well, good evening, Lawrence, and thank you for having me on. Well, I think in two principal ways. First, I think Donald Trump has badly sullied the reputation of the office of the presidency with his invective, with his constant disregard, I think, for human decency, as well as his befriending of autocratic leaders around the world, and his continued pursuit of relationships to benefit himself as opposed to the country. I do think that America's standing in the world has also been tarnished. But I think even more fundamentally, what he is doing here in the United States is very polarizing, and he is, I think, the most divisive president we've ever had in the Oval Office. He is feeding and fueling hatred and animosity and misunderstandings among Americans. And so I'm very concerned when I look at some of the tweets that are out there and commentary. We are just fighting with each other as a nation. And this is something that the President of the United States traditionally has been the one to try to heal these domestic wounds, these domestic problems. But I think Donald Trump has failed repeatedly to try to do that. He continues just to play to his base of support and feeds them, basically with raw meat, a lot of this language that tends to get them riled up. That is not something that is in our nation's security.
I want to draw on your experience.
Now he's going to put his name on a big piece of Eastern Airlines.
Trump was creating a public persona, one that could be both funny and demeaning, arrogant and somehow in touch with the common man.
I sort of love and hate him.
I don't hate niggers, man. I don't associate with niggers. On the other hand, I don't associate with common white trash or Jews or Catholics, if I can help it.
Right. This is the Grand Dragon of the North Carolina realm of the United Clans, J. Robert Jones, former sailor, bricklayer, lightning rod salesman. He now reportedly rules over more than 50 claverns, or chapters, and their 7,000 dues-paying members.
I think the nigger has rights in this country. He should have equal rights, but separate rights. It's worked for 100 years in the South, and I think it will work now. But if you was the nicest fella in the world and Lyndon Johnson said I had to associate with you every day, I'd tell Lyndon Johnson to go straight to hell because I would not associate with you.
This is the Grand Consul, the late Matt Murphy, who until his recent death was Chief Legal Counsel of the United Clans. His favorite targets were the Negroes, Jews, the Fedistum, and international bankers.
I had made speeches before the United Clans of America, and they were the only organization that ever went on record after I had talked for 2 solid hours on the viciousness of the Federal Reserve Corporation and how it has built the taxpayers and American citizens out of all the money, and that Great Britain has removed the bank from the international bankers, and their bank is back under the crown.
Is Nighthawk? This is a Nighthawk of the United Clans in North Carolina. A Nighthawk is responsible for the security of a clavern.
Why did you join the Clans? Well, I've got a wife, 5 kids. I think that's enough reason. I want them to have a country to be raised up in like I was. I wasn't forced to go to school with niggers. I wasn't forced to eat with them. And I want them to have at least the right that I had.
It's a disarmament act.
This is Mr. Outlaw. Wherever Jones goes, Mr. Outlaw, the Grand Clexter or guard, is at his side. In the group are the 3 defendants indicted for the killing of Mrs. Liuzzo: Eugene Thomas, William Eaton, and Cully Leroy Wilkins.
Congress has allowed its authority over this very important issue of war-making to ebb. It is time for us to reassert that authority and to start asking some very tough questions about the wars, and I use the word wars, W-A-R-S, that we are currently in. Now, some people may think that this is an interesting, abstract discussion. We have brilliant constitutional scholars, wonderful intellectual debate. But let me assure every person here that the abdication of Congress to its responsibilities over war has had incredibly dire and horrific consequences for the people of our country and, in fact, the world. So I want to bring this down to earth and away from an abstract, although enormously important constitutional discussion. I want to give you 3 examples in recent American history where Congress did not ask the right questions, abdicated its responsibility, and the consequences were enormous. Very few Americans know that when we deal with Iran, very much in the news right now, how many people know that in 1953, the United States, along with the British, overthrew the democratically elected government of Mohammad Mossadegh, reinstalling authoritarian rule under the Shah. In 1979, the Shah was overthrown in the Iranian Revolution, bringing to power an extremist anti-American government. In 1953, the United States government, without congressional approval, thought that it could simply remove the government of Iran in order to protect wealthy oil interests. And what has been the consequences of that over the years? Congress abdicated its responsibility. And the second one, more relevant to my generation, was the war in Vietnam. In 1964, now Iran took place under Eisenhower, Republican. In 1964, Lyndon Johnson, Democrat, otherwise, in my view, a very great president. But in this instance, cited an attack on a U.S. ship in the Gulf of Tonkin as a pretext for escalating the U.S. intervention in Vietnam. But we now know from his own recordings that Johnson himself doubted that story about that attack. Johnson's administration misled both Congress and the American people into a war that resulted in the loss of over 50,000 American soldiers and over 1 million Vietnamese. Congress was lied to. There was no serious debate about American intervention in that war. Third example, more recently, that we all remember was Iraq. Today, it is now broadly acknowledged that the Iraq War was a foreign policy blunder of enormous magnitude. In this case, the Bush administration lied to the American people, claiming that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. The result of that war, the loss of thousands of brave American soldiers, the displacement of millions of people in the Middle East, and bringing us to where we are right now. In other words,
any way the president looks, he can see legal threats closing in around him. There's the Russia connection. Long a favourite of the president's liberal foes is the idea that he knowingly colluded with the Russians, joining forces against Hillary Clinton.
There was no collusion at all. I didn't know the president. There was nobody to collude with.
Just this week, the president changed course over a key 2016 meeting between his son and a Russian lawyer. Having previously said it was about adoption policy, on Sunday he admitted it was a meeting to get information on an opponent, totally legal and done all the time in politics, but that he hadn't known about it. And indeed that hints at the difficulties former FBI Director Robert Mueller will have at proving direct collusion. Mr. Trump can always blame associates, even his own son, for things he had no knowledge of.
There's a lot of stuff being thrown around. Collusion versus conspiracy.
But watching President Trump this week, he sure seemed like a man who is worried about both.
in other words, what we have seen is time and time again, disasters occur when administrations, Democrat and Republican, mislead Congress and the American people, and when Congress fails to do its constitutional job in terms of asking the hard questions of whether or not we should be in a war. And I think we need to ask that very hard question today. And here is the point that I hope the American people are asking themselves. Is the war on terror a perpetual, never-ending war necessary to keep us safe? I personally believe that we have become far too comfortable with the United States engaging in military interventions all over the world. After 9/11, Congress passed an authorization for the use of military force, quote, against those responsible for the recent attacks launched against the United States, end quote. The following year, Congress passed the 2002 AUMF against Iraq. We have now been in Afghanistan for 17 years. We have been in Iraq for 15 years. We are occupying a portion of Syria, and this administration has indicated that it may broaden that mission even more. We are waging a secretive drone war in at least 5 countries. Our forces right now, as we speak, are supporting a Saudi-led war in Yemen, which has killed thousands of civilians and has created the worst humanitarian crisis on the planet today. Clearly, these outdated and expansive AUMFs have been used by 3 different administrations, Republican and Democrat, as a blank check for the president to wage war without congressional consent or oversight. Meanwhile, we are currently, quote unquote, fighting terrorism in some 76 countries, with an estimated cost of $5.6 trillion and untold lives lost since 2001.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is my humble duty tonight to introduce you to the Grand and Imperial Wizard of the Invisible Knights of the Ku Klux Klan, Mr. Bill Wilkinson. Oh, Imperial Wizard, can you tell me, and us, 100 years after your predecessors set the South aflame with the cross burnings, lynchings, and other events, you should be bothering this country still?
To begin with, I believe a slight rebuttal is in order for your opening statements, or the opening statements that was made about the Klan. We are not anti-Catholic. We are not anti-Semitic. We believe in the white race. We believe that at this point in time that white Americans are being treated as second-class citizens, that the federal laws, the civil rights laws, have created a dual system of justice in this country, a set of federal laws that protects the interest of minorities and local and state laws.
But Grand and Imperial Wizard,
if I may, of white people.
If I may interrupt, if I might be so bold as to interrupt the Imperial Wizard, it says on a sheet that you people hand out to the young and the youths of our high schools, it says, if you want to join the Klan, quote, "I swear that I am of white, non-Jewish heritage. Are you fed up with special privileges given to blacks?" That's a quotation from your own literature.
Absolutely. We are
well,
a Christian.
What do you mean you're not anti-Semitic?
We are a Christian organization. We also don't allow Buddhists or Muslims or atheists in the organization.
When did you take in the Pat Buchanans? When I was a kid in Dubuque, Iowa, the Ku Klux Klan, which was then fairly powerful in Indiana, about 1922 or 3, somewhere in there, you were anti-Catholic.
The Klan has had different views from time to time on lesser issues. Mm-hmm. The one issue we've never changed on is that of segregation. We believe that God has commanded us to separate ourselves from other races. In fact, that's not a unique stand. Billy Graham, just a few years ago, himself segregated his crusade audiences. He preached segregation. The Southern Baptist and the National Baptist, one was black, one was white. Mm-hmm. They practiced and preached segregation. So we didn't invent segregation. We just still believe in it.
Let me ask you about something, and you did correct it, let me say, before the show started, something I was unaware of. But there are a number of Klan organizations, and I gather it is not yours, who march in tandem, arm in arm, with members of the American Nazi Party. Now, the Nazis were responsible for the murder, not simply of Jews in Germany, but American pilots, American soldiers. They are guilty of all manner of horrid atrocities. They have on their, I guess on their record, some 250,000 American dead. Now, why would any patriotic American, or one who calls himself a patriotic American, be anywhere near the swastika, the insignia of Hitler's Germany?
Well, as you conceded before the show, I did clear up that point. The Klan, the Invisible Empire, which I head, detests Nazis as much as we do communists. But I'd like to make one thing clear, that there's too much hype today about the Germans and the Nazis. Let's not forget that the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor and they led to death marches in Bataan. I don't believe that we should condemn all of the Germans for something that happened in Germany 40 years ago. And I do condemn what Hitler did to any.
Why would any patriot, someone who calls himself a patriot, and a Klan's groups with which I guess you're associated with members, if not the leadership, why would they march with people who march under the swastika?
We don't.
You don't. Why do your colleagues do that?
I believe, to make it clear at first, we're the only national Klan organization left. There have been those that have come and gone. It's sort of like the political parties, the Democrats, Republicans, American independents. They come and they go. They splinter and they regroup and rejoin. Right now, we are the major unquestioned Klan organization in America. There's some people that we have expelled from our organization that will start other branches. in their anxiety to get membership
All right,
and support,
as
they
I
will
gather,
join with anyone, including Nazis.
This is not your organization, doesn't believe that. But I believe a quote by you I read in a book on the Klan today. You were denouncing the quote, I think it was Jew-controlled media. Have you used that term?
I may have used that term.
It's a direct quote.
I may have used that term some years ago.
Well, what do you mean by that?
But I don't mean by that anything at this point in time. I believe that a lot of Jews are prominent in the media, but I believe that a lot of Baptists and a lot of Methodists and a lot of other people are.
Why would you use the term Jew-controlled media? You know?
Well,
I mean, you don't run around saying the Baptist-controlled media is keeping us off the air, do you?
I no longer use that term. This has been a number of years ago that I would have made that comment, and I'm not apologizing for what I might have said at that time.
All right, let's talk about blacks.
All right.
Why are you
wait a
running
minute, I want to
around?
go, my brother came back from the airborne in Vietnam, and he told me, that of the bodies that he took out as a medical officer, he said, 50% of those guys were black kids. Served in the United States and Vietnam. This was it was a crack frontline unit, and these were American blacks who died in higher numbers for their country in Southeast Asia in that war than did white Americans, as a matter of fact, in the Vietnam War. Now, how can you be against a race which contains people who are out there fighting for their country just as much as white Christian Protestant Americans are?
That's something else that needs to be cleared up, Pat. We're not against the black race. We're not against. We believe in free enterprise for this country. We believe that everyone should have the same rights.
Well, Mr. Wizard, it says right here. Wait a minute, Mr. Wizard. Let me interrupt you for a minute, Mr. Wizard. It says right here, you believe in the final solution, which is black repatriation to Africa. Now,
Abraham Lincoln, but now look, I'm not going to be cut off in the middle.
No, but I'm not going to be shut off either. You're running around on a bed sheet. I don't have the bed sheet. But I just want to tell you, I want to ask you this question. Can you imagine this country repatriating all the black Americans that Pat just spoke about to Africa?
No.
I mean, what kind of nonsense
No, I
is
can't.
that? Well, what are you saying it for then?
I'm not saying it.
Well, it says right here.
No, that's your paper. That's not my paper.
That's your paper. I took the quote and wrote it on this blue type.
That's not my paper. Now, to get back to it, now just a minute, I answered your question. Now, I want to finish what I was saying. We feel that affirmative action is discriminating against white people, and there is no question about it. Two wrongs don't make a right. Because black people were hurt and discriminated against in the past does not justify the discrimination against white people now. And we're asking for an end to that.
Look, I'm against reverse discrimination. I'm against racial quotas. I'm against affirmative action as it's practiced. But you said, when I introduced you, I didn't say that your organization was. I said, historically, to most Americans, you're anti-Catholic and anti-Semitic and racist. In other words, anti-black. You said, we're not anti-Catholic.
Right.
We're not anti-Semitic. You didn't deny the racist thing.
Well, it depends on your definition of racist. I'm a segregationist, okay? I believe that God has commanded me not to mix with other races. For that reason, I want to have schools where I can send my children to a white school. I want to be able to go to my white neighborhoods, to white businesses, for those things. So if that terms me as a racist, then I'm a racist.
Wait a minute, you can do that, but you can't have...
They're stuck up. They're all racist. I'm gonna add that. They might be nice in your face, but behind your back, they're gonna say something.
What were you gonna say, Dakota? Well, I think people say, oh, black people can get ghetto real fast. Well, I can get ghetto real fast, okay? And
this is something that I've always asked other people. What is ghetto? Like, I don't understand, what is ghetto?
Take earrings off and stuff.
I know, but that's not...
I mean, it's on TV. Somebody says ghetto every 5 seconds on if you turn on Housewives.
I know, I understand what the definition of it.
I
hate that word.
Why do you hate that word?
Because it's not